What if one of Earth's continents has been hiding in plain sight at the bottom of the ocean? That's the bold claim behind Zealandia, a largely submerged landmass that some scientists now argue deserves full continent status. And this is the part most people miss. If Zealandia counts, it could force a rethink of what a continent even is. Zealandia is often described as Earth's hidden or ghost continent, lying mostly beneath the South Pacific Ocean. For decades, school maths showed only 7 continents, so the idea of an 8th one sounds like clickbait. Yet the geological case for Zealandia has grown increasingly strong. As mapping technology has improved and researchers have gathered more data from the seafloor, Zealandia has gone from fringe idea to serious scientific discussion. What Zealandia actually is, at its core, Zealandia is a vast piece of continental crust in the Southwest Pacific that is mostly underwater, but still behaves like a classic continent in geological terms. Instead of being a random patchwork of seafloor, it forms a coherent block of thick, light, and compositionally distinct crust, very different from the dicho, denser oceanic crust that surrounds it. Zealandia spreads over roughly 4.9 million square kilometers, putting it in the same size class as India and making it far too large to be dismissed as just a microcontinent or a scattered group of islands. Yet only around 5% of this enormous area peaks above sea level today. Those exposed portions are what we know as New Zealand, New Caledonia, and a handful of smaller islands scattered across the region. Why a sunken landmass can be a continent? An underwater continent sounds like something out of science fiction, and that's exactly why many people instinctively resist the idea. But in geology, being a continent is less about whether land is dry and more about how the crust is built and how it formed over time. Continental crust is usually thicker, lighter, and made of different rock types than oceanic crust, and Zealandia checks all those boxes. Beneath the waves of the Pacific and Tasman seas, Zealandia's ridges and plateaus sit just below the surface, forming a continuous, complex structure rather than isolated oceanic features. Its crust varies in thickness, contains remnants of ancient mountain roots, and can be divided into distinct geological provinces stretching across its breadth. Exactly what geologists expect from a true continent. Why Zealandia stayed hidden so long? So why did it take this long for anyone to talk seriously about an 8th continent? For much of modern history, continents were defined in a pretty simple way. If you can stand on it and it sticks above the ocean, it's a continent. That visual, map-based mindset meant any mostly submerged landmass was easy to overlook. As plate tectonics became better understood, scientists realized that continents are not static blocks, but can be stretched, broken, and even mostly drowned, while still keeping their continental identity. Zealandia's long, spite-out shape and unusually thin crust hint at a violent tectonic past, one where the land was pulled apart so much that it lost enough buoyancy to sink, but not enough to be destroyed entirely. The mapping project that changed everything. The real turning point came in 2023, when researchers at GNS Science completed the first full geological map of Zealandia, from its exposed islands all the way to its underwater margins. No other continent has been mapped so completely to its submerged edges before, which already makes Zealandia scientifically unique. To build this map, scientists combined several methods: dredging rocks from the seafloor, running seismic surveys to image structures beneath the seabed, measuring magnetic patterns, and using crustal models to distinguish continental from oceanic regions. Put together, these techniques outlined a single, sprawling landmass with a consistent internal structure, including volcanic arcs, sedimentary basins, metamorphic belts, and extensive granitic zones. Zealandia's granite spine, one of the most striking features revealed by the mapping, is a roughly 4,000-kilometer-long belt of granite known as the median batholith. This ancient feature runs through a large portion of Zealandia and effectively acts like a geological backbone, much like ancient mountain belts do on other continents. The granite belt, along with volcanic fields and crustal blocks that match exposed rocks in both New Zealand and New Caledonia, shows that these scattered islands are just the visible peaks of a much larger, unified continental system. This structural coherence, the way everything fits together as one entity, has been central to the argument that Zealandia deserves to stand alongside the traditional 7 continents. How Zealandia broke off and drowned. To understand how a whole continent ended up beneath the ocean, it helps to rewind to the age of the supercontinents. Zealandia was once welded to Antarctica and Australia as part of Gondwana, a massive southern supercontinent that dominated Earth's surface tens of millions of years ago. During the Cretaceous period, tectonic forces began pulling Gondwana apart, and Zealandia's crust was stretched dramatically in the process. As the crust thinned, its buoyancy decreased, causing the landmass to slowly subside. At the same time, magmatic activity ramped up, building a volcanic region roughly the size of modern New Zealand on top of the weakening crust. Why it sank but didn't disappear? Those intense tectonic and volcanic episodes made Zealandia's crust even more fragile, and large portions eventually subsided to their current depths beneath the sea. Crucially, though, the crust did not shatter into tiny isolated fragments. It remained a broad, continuous slab of continental material, altered and thinned, but still recognizably continental. Because Zealandia stayed intact as one large crustal block, it retains enough of the hallmarks of a continent to be classified as one, even though most of it lies underwater. This partially drowned state is one reason New Zealand's landscapes look young and active. The region is still being shaped by the ongoing collision and sliding between the Pacific and Australian tectonic plates, which drives earthquakes, mountain building, and volcanic eruptions along the exposed edges of Zealandia. Why calling it a continent matters? You might wonder, does giving Zealandia continent status really change anything beyond trivia? In science, it actually matters a lot. Accepting Zealandia as the 8th continent nudges geologists to refine their definitions, prioritizing crustal structure, composition, and tectonic history over the simple fact of whether land is above water. This shift opens the door to re-examining other submerged regions of thick crust and asking whether they too might represent overlooked continental fragments. Zealandia becomes a natural laboratory for studying what happens when a continent is stretched to extremes, how it thins, rifts, partly sinks, and continues to evolve over tens of millions of years. What scientists can learn from Zealandia, with a full map in hand, researchers can now investigate how continents respond to intense tectonic stretching or bursts of volcanic activity, and how these processes reshape continental margins around the globe. That kind of insight feeds directly into better models of plate behavior, mantle dynamics, and the long-term evolution of Earth's crust. For New Zealand and neighboring regions, understanding Zealandia is not just academically interesting. It improves hazard assessments, resource exploration, and environmental planning. A clearer picture of the underlying continent helps scientists anticipate where earthquakes might cluster, how mountains are likely to grow or erode, and how geological structures could influence offshore resources or ecosystems. The controversial part no one agrees on. Here's where it gets controversial. Not all geologists are fully on board with calling Zealandia a continent, at least not yet. Some argue that because it is almost entirely submerged, it doesn't match the traditional, intuitive idea of a continent that people learn about in school. Others counter that clinging to a purely visual definition ignores half a century of plate tectonics and crustal science. So a deeper question emerges. Should the definition of continent evolve with our scientific understanding, even if that means rewriting textbooks and confusing the classic 7-continent model? Or should common sense geography, what we can actually see above sea level, still carry more weight? What do you think? If Zealandia has the right crust, the right structure, and the right geological story, does it deserve to be officially recognized as Earth's 8th continent? Or should something that's 95% underwater never share the same status as Asia, Africa, or Europe? Share where you stand and why in the comments. Would you rewrite the map of the world or keep the 7-continent story we grew up with?